Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast about your Kindle, books, and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. This is the show for May 10th, 2019. Greetings to you from downtown Denver, Colorado. I am putting this episode together a day early because tomorrow, Friday, I am going to fly to Austin, Texas to spend a few days with my cousin Peter Ty. Peter is blind, and part of our time together is going to be spent trying out Aira, A-I-R-A. That's a device for the blind that I heard about at South by Southwest this year, and it won an innovation award at South by. A pair of Aira eyeglasses will connect Peter to agents in a call center who will be able to see what's in front of him through the glasses, and they will be able to speak with him and help him navigate everything from reading his mail to going for a walk in the neighborhood. I've watched the videos and I've read about it. It looks pretty fascinating and kind of a brilliant use of technology that might really be helpful to Peter. So I'm going to be interested to see how it works and if it's going to be worth the monthly subscription that it will cost to use it. My guest this week, Tim Carmody, is a technology writer with a PhD in comparative literature. His Amazon Chronicles newsletter, launched earlier this year, I think is an excellent news source of news and commentary about a company that I know is of considerable interest to everyone listening to this podcast.
You can imagine an Amazon without Alexa that is still very successful, but Alexa is a huge key to Amazon's future.
Also this week, Alexa for senior citizens and a Mother's Day sale on all kinds of Amazon gadgets. Almost feels like summer. Big sale. First up in news is an article that I saw. It was from a Sacramento CBS affiliate, Channel 13, and there was actually a TV story about it. They were featuring an independent senior living place northeast of Sacramento in Roseville, Eskaton Village, where they had given an Echo Dot to all the residents in the community. And there's some cute descriptions of it. There's one woman, 92 years old, who's talking about it. And here's a clip from that news story from Channel 13 in Sacramento.
Alexa, tell me the time.
The time is 9:40 a.m.
I don't know if it's lazy or old age or just what it is. It's convenient.
It's a small device that is helping senior citizens like 92-year-old Joyce Lynch in a big way.
My children keep thinking I should join the 21st century, and I think Alexa has made it possible.
This story interests me personally for two reasons. One, my parents not too long ago moved into a senior community in Massachusetts, and also Peter has moved into a community in Austin. So I'm familiar with these places and with the needs and the opportunities there are to serve the people that live in them. I think the experiment that took place in Sacramento at Eskaton is noteworthy because it's sort of really going at it in a big way, giving one of the devices to everyone in the community, and they're also planning to do the same thing they have about 25 other communities in the Northern California area, which they're going to do. It seems to me that the benefits of doing that is that you create kind of a buzz. Everybody's talking about this in their community. There was a sign that talked about the Alexa buzz and training sessions. And so everybody is kind of helping each other to understand what this technology could do for them. I've, of course, been encouraging my parents to use Alexa devices in their apartment. And the main thing that we've been doing successfully is using the Echo Show. We've got an Echo Show with a screen in the rooms of the apartment, so I can just drop in, see if they're in the dining room, maybe they're in the exercise room, and then we can have a chat. Pretty frequently I end up dropping in around mealtime, and they have meals in their unit a lot, so we just have a chance to visit. I'm sort of envious that I don't get to have one of the delicious pastries that they serve for dessert, but I'm just there visiting with them in a very informal way. But that's something that I'm doing one-on-one with my parents. If the place that they live were to make a device available for everyone with this kind of a backup, I think it would certainly result in a lot of adoption of it. The people that talk about it say that their top uses for are play music. They can hear the menu for the place for the day, news, and then I'd be interested how they set this up. They can apparently contact the front desk in an emergency with their Alexa device. I thought I would just do a little roaming around the internet in light of this story, and I found a site called Tech Enhanced Life, and it's at techenhancedlife.com. Looks like it was formed by a fellow named Richard Caro, C-A-R-O, and he has a group of people called the Longevity Explorers who get together. They're people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, talking about technology and just the needs they have living in an assisted living or senior center. There was one audio clip where one of the people on this panel is describing how she is using Alexa, and I like it because there's nothing new here in terms of how she's using Alexa, but the sense of discovery that she has had, and now she's sharing it with her neighbors, and their exclamations about, well, it must be really expensive, or how do you buy, where do you buy it? There's a real freshness to listening in on the moment that some people who aren't familiar with the technology are being told about it by one of their peers who understands how it might be helpful. Here's some of that audio.
What I like about her, though, is we have discovered that when we're still lying in bed before we get up, one of us will say, "What's the weather forecast today, Alexa?" Or, "Alexa," that's what you should start with. "What's the weather forecast?" And she says, "In Saratoga today, it is now," and she gives you the temperature, and then the weather forecast is sunny with a high of 58 and a low of 39.
Boy, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And then she'll tell jokes, too. So I just have to say to her, "Alexa, tell me a joke." They haven't been very good so far.
There are more questions about the device, and then the leader of the circle enters in with some comments before they wrap up.
It's not a cheap gadget, is it?
You don't think $50 is cheap?
Well, that's what it is to get Alexa? Oh.
For one room, anyway.
Thank you.
And no monthly subscription?
No.
Very good.
How big is it? That big. I mean, that little.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite a few of our circle members are getting Alexa, and they all have something a little bit different they want to do with it. So I'm kind of listening with
Where do you
interest.
buy it? Amazon.
Where did you buy yours?
Amazon.
Oh, Amazon.
Oh, Amazon, indeed. If I didn't know better, I might think this was an Amazon ad. It's such a nice little pageant of people getting to know the Alexa device. You know, if I was running a place like the one that my parents live at or where Peter lives, and someone came to me full of enthusiasm about these devices, someone like myself, I would be cautious because, yes, it's easy to see the benefits in a setting like that, all the different things that technology can do to help people that can't get up to turn lights on themselves, that want to stay in touch with family, even people with dementia, that, it's helpful and comforting just to ask the same question over and over and not have Alexa get angry about it. But the problem is, and the challenge, which I don't think is insurmountable, is that the details of implementing any kind of an Alexa system are really where you can kind of run up against problems, especially, I think, in the population of older people. I feel it right here in our house. I have one light in our living room here in Denver, which is on an Alexa device. It's a timer of some kind. And I set it up right. I use the app. And sometimes, most of the time, if I say, Alexa, turn on the light goes on and everything's fine. But I think sometimes when Darlene manually turns the light on or off, it throws it out of whack. And so every once in a while, I'll give the command and the light won't do what it's supposed to. And then I have to go and do some horsing around in the app to get it to work again. Well, a problem like that for people in a senior center, I think, is where they would decide this just isn't worth it. I've got enough frustrations with that come with growing old that I don't need to have something that's supposed to be helping me cause this much trouble. I think that a way through that might be if there was some kind of an introduction period and then an IT staff, like, most big places have IT staffs, like the place that my parents has one. And there was a period of time, we're going to have this roll out, and then we're going to have meetings, and we're going to show people how to do it, and then there's going to be an Alexa hotline, and if anybody has any kind of a problem with using the device, somebody shows up and walks them through it. And the advantage of that is that I have noticed with my folks that when they get to using one of these devices habitually, so that it's just kind of second nature, then that's the real payoff. I noticed this when I was at my folks' place last week when I was visiting, and something came up about the song Anniversary Waltz, because I had a friend show up at the dinner the other night on our 35th anniversary and surprised Darlene by playing the Anniversary Waltz on a violin. It was quite a moment. She was completely surprised. So I was telling Dad about this, and without pause or like he was talking to somebody who was in the conversation with us in the living room there, he just said, "Alexa, play the Anniversary Waltz." And she played the song, and I noticed how he wasn't even thinking about how to do it or what to say or what volume to say it. He has been using that Echo device. It's an Echo Show, the one I use for the video drop-ins, in a way that makes it just easy for him and absolutely useful. So I think we'll probably, I'm sure there are lots of cases across the country, and there was a conference I went to last year where we saw evidence of that and some very creative things being done. I would be glad to help out on my parents' place or Peter's place, knowing that it's a daunting project, but it's still one that I think would be pretty useful. The other news story I want to tell you about is Mother's Day is bringing out some pretty sweet prices on some of the Kindles and the Fire tablets, also some other devices like the Echo, which is the Echo Dot, which is selling for $30, down from $50. But one of the ones that's most striking is the sale on the Paperwhite, and this is the new Paperwhite that was introduced last November. It's on sale for $90. That's $40 off the regular price of $130. And there's also, in some ways, an even better way to do it. If you want to get the Paperwhite plus a case, I always like having a case on my Kindles, plus the power adapter, which you need. If you have lots of these power adapters for a micro USB cable, fine. But if you're just buying a Kindle, sometimes it can be a shock to realize that there's a USB cable in the box, but there isn't the thing that you need to plug it into the wall with. So this, they call it the Paperwhite Essentials bundle, and it includes the 8 gigabyte Paperwhite, that's the smallest storage, Wi-Fi with special offers, and a cover and the power adapter. Sorry, no steak knives, but it's a pretty good package for $130, and that's a savings of $60 on what it would cost to buy those three things separately. You can pay a little more for that if you want the Premier Leather Rustic cover, which I have, and I think it's worth the extra. Let's see, that's an extra $20, $150 instead of $130. The ones that come with the $130 bundle price, you can choose from black, indigo, purple, merlot, punch red. Also, good prices on the Fire tablets. The Fire 7 is down $10 to $40. The Fire HD 8, which is the one I really love, is $60. That's down $20. And the Fire HD 10 is $120. That's down $30 from the normal price. These are great prices if you're in the market for one of these devices or some of the other Amazon devices that you'll find at Amazon.com. Good time to take advantage of them. I don't think there'll be another big sale event until July, when Prime Day usually takes place. If you buy any of these devices from the website, thekindlechronicles.com, I have my associates' information keyed in, so you'll be paying the same price, but you'll be giving a little boost to the Kindle Chronicles through the Amazon associates. Much appreciated. For the tech tip, I've got an item from Dan, who wrote, "Hi, Len. You mentioned that you have a new software update that changes the highlighting to look like underlining." This is on the Kindle e-ink devices. I have 5.11.1.1 on my Kindle Voyage, which Amazon shows as the latest firmware update. My highlighting is still the kind that shades the words as I highlight. I think I'd prefer the way it currently is, though I haven't seen the underlining yet. But I find it interesting that Amazon would have that feature different across devices. Is that new highlighting on both of your Oasis generations? I believe that you and your wife had kept one of each generation between you both. Do you still have the Paperwhite? And if so, is it on that? I'm curious. Dan. Dan, I checked my Oasis against Darlene's Oasis, and you're right, hers is the older generation. Each of them has this new way of highlighting where when you're dragging your finger or a stylus across the words, it's underlining them as opposed to actually adding the highlight in as you're dragging. Once you've completed the selection, then the highlight appears as it did before. I'm starting to think that I like this better. It seems cleaner to be able to have the underline show where I'm highlighting, and it's kind of an aesthetic change, but it's a good one, I think. I suspect that what's going on here is that the active members of the Kindle family, which would be the basic Kindle, the Paperwhite, and the Oasis, have this capability. And the Voyage, which is, there are no real orphans in the Kindle line because the firmware updates come and these things last for years. But it may be that that the Voyage and perhaps some of the earlier Kindles are not going to have this capability built in. But good question. Thanks for asking. Tim Carmody earlier this year launched a weekly newsletter named the Amazon Chronicles, which led me to reach out to him to let him know that there was already a long-running podcast about Amazon that was using the word Chronicles in its name. He apologized for not having known about my show, but at that point his project was already launched, so I told him not to worry about it. I also said that I'd like to have him on this show once he had been publishing for a while. I emailed Tim last week after seeing that he was putting the newsletter on a hiatus because of health problems, and I told him that now might be a good time to share his experience so far with the Amazon Chronicles. And that's how this week's interview came about. I recorded our conversation by Skype on Wednesday, May 7th. Tim earned a BA in mathematics and philosophy in 2001 from the University of Michigan, and then studied philosophy, political science, and social thought at the University of Chicago before completing a PhD in comparative literature at the University of Pennsylvania in 2009. He had originally planned to be a high school math teacher, but as so often happens in life, his plans gave way to other opportunities and challenges.
I went to college and sort of fell in love with all things college and humanities in particular. So I was a literature and philosophy major and ended up pursuing a PhD in comparative literature. Hit the job market in 2008, which was, if I had to do it over again, probably would have timed it a little bit better.
Yeah.
So that was pretty rough for a couple of years. I did a postdoc for a year, and then my first, I'd already been blogging and had been writing some for The Atlantic and the Chronicle of Higher Education, and sort of doing the sort of like in-between academic and popular writing, and was able to get my first job at Wired as a gadget blogger based out of that, which was really fortunate for me because it was pretty rough sledding trying to find work with a literature PhD.
And that was in 2010?
2010 was, my first year on as a gadget blogger.
Were you where were you based when you were working for Wired?
So I was in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not have a ton of people on the East Coast, so I covered the East Coast and would commute back up and forth to New York every so often.
And you had quite a beat there. You were basically the media reporter. Is that right?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, we had a few other people covering a handful of other things and covering like legal aspects and other things like that. But as far as like media intersection with like popular media intersection with technology, that was a lot of what I was doing in terms of covering media companies. So Amazon, Netflix, anything kind of e-reader or Hulu, digital video, digital text. That's what I was doing.
Right. Now, at that time, it was about 3 years after the introduction of the Kindle, and you've written somewhere that Amazon was your favorite beat at Wired in those days. Why was it your favorite beat?
Well, I was always interested in the Kindle. I was always interested in ebooks and publishing. Some of that is academic hangover. One of the areas I studied was the history of the book, and was interested in the history and technology of reading. So Amazon was really perfect for me, and was also something that I was sort of well versed in terms of knowing a lot of the different companies and the different people in the publishing industry and everything else. But Amazon was also always bigger than that as well because of its role in e-commerce. So there was always sort of this idea that it's like, yes, Amazon's a book company, but it's also, the everything store. So it was always on the way to some bigger idea what Amazon could be.
I've always been intrigued by this management technique that Bezos, I assume he's the author of it, and it continues throughout Amazon. When they have some kind of a new project, everybody sits down and reads a 6-page memo that someone has prepared, and they're all sitting there reading it in silence, and then the discussion begins. It's a very sort of literary management tool, and I wonder if you've given that any thought, given how much you know about rhetoric and writing and reading. Is it a good idea for them, or? I
don't have like a grand theory of it. I would love to be able to just tell you this is exactly what it means, and this is. But I think there's a lot of kind of academic study of the memo that it would be really interesting and fun to apply to Amazon in that way. But that almost devotional aspect to it is really fascinating.
You mean there's academic research on memos just as a form of writing?
Yeah, on like the memo as a genre, in particular the memo as a kind of genre that helps inaugurate modernity.
It struck me, being a writer and a lover of reading, a wonderful way to have people clarify their thinking and share it. But I've also wondered, they're so slavish to it, apparently. I'm surprised that, I've talked to people at different subsidiaries they bought, and they say, oh, yeah, we always use this 6-page memo, and I had to learn how to do the 6-page memo. There's got to be a downside to it, that when you have something that you're always using as a way to analyze a new project, I'm wondering what kinds of situations it might just not be suited to, and they would be better off having some other tools other than the 6-page memo.
No, of course. I think that's broadly speaking true in terms of Amazon's way of viewing the world. Is that there's a lot about it that works, and there's a lot about it that's messy and exclusive, and probably forecloses it to some other possibilities.
You were on the staff at Wired for a few years, and then you got into, looks like, sort of a freelancing period.
Yeah, so I was at Wired for a couple of years, then I was at The Verge for a year, and then I've been a freelancer pretty much since I left The Verge.
And one of the places that you continue to write for is Kottke.org, and that's the noticing newsletter. What are you attempting to do there?
Well, Kottke is one of the oldest blogs we have still. So it started in 1998, and it is a sort of miscellany of science and humanities and history and just general things that people are interested in. So the newsletter I write for Jason at Kottke.org is a summary of the week's posts, usually with I'll expand on some things and compress others, try to find common themes through the things. So it's really just sort of the best of the blog.
And
for the week.
He's writing the blog, and then there are other contributors as well?
Yeah, so I also write usually 3 posts a week on Fridays, the same day I write the newsletter, and then there are a handful of other contributors who come in, and usually we'll do guest weeks and other things, but mostly it's JasonKotke.org, Jason Kotke.
You launched the Amazon Chronicles late January of this year. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of that project and why you did it and what you were hoping to accomplish.
Well, it was partly, it's funny, that I'm on hiatus now because I have a broken shoulder, but it was just after I broke my shoulder that I launched the newsletter, and it was something that I had been thinking about for a while, but after I broke my shoulder and had this sort of health scare, was something that I was particularly galvanized to try to do as quickly as possible. And it was really something that I had always wanted to read, was kind of a good weekly newsletter about Amazon, and a summary of all of its different tendrils. There's good reporting on Amazon that's being done in business publications, good reporting in tech publications, good reporting in media publications and publishing, and but it's all kind of scattered. So the ability to try to gather as much up of that as possible was something that seemed like a really obvious opportunity and a really valuable service to try to be able to do for other readers.
How did you break your shoulder?
I had a seizure.
Oh.
So I have a seizure disorder that's a result of an old injury, which I hadn't had a seizure in, I think, 5 years.
Yeah.
But I had a seizure while I was sleeping and managed to fracture my shoulder while I was asleep.
How recently did you have the surgery to repair it?
So it's actually still coming up.
Oh.
It's going to be May 22nd.
I see. And so you're hoping that you'll have that surgery recover and then resume the newsletter maybe in early July?
Yep, that's the idea.
Yeah. Well, you had an interesting model in the statement of purpose that you published on January 27th. You said that you plan to go to twice a week when you reach 400 paid subscribers, and I think you reached that level in February. So you revised it to 500 being sort of the mark at which you'd go to one feature, one sort of an overview of other stories. Does your paid subscribership, has it reached the 500 level yet?
So we're still just short of 500.
I see.
So some of that is I haven't made a big push on it yet, just because I'm still not quite ready to go to twice a week yet. So it's about 480.
Yeah.
Right now,
getting close.
So fairly close.
Yeah,
but that is the idea: is that there would be a weekly summary or aggregation of other reporting, and then there would be either a deep dive or some original reporting or something that would be more single subject, standalone piece of analysis or reporting that I would do on my own.
I was intrigued because you've talked about it, I think, in terms of the commons, and you have some people paying $5 a month, $50 a year, and some people subscribing and getting it free if there are enough people paying for the subscriptions. How does that all work as a whole? It seems like some people are getting a free ride and other people are paying for it, but there seems something about that works.
Yeah, I think there's something about it where there are people who are willing to pay so that other people can get it for free.
Yeah.
So I wrote a post about it called "Unlocking the Commons," which I published once at Kotke.org and published a different version at Nieman Journalism Lab. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of an NPR or
right.
There are other comparable models where you have members who will pledge to support, and other people sort of get to free ride on that support a little bit. But it does seem to be a model that is valuable in terms of maximizing reach to the greatest size audience possible, and also generating a lot of value for the people who do pledge into it, because I think they do seem to get something out of the fact that their support is what makes the publication possible.
Right. And what does the overall subscriber count stand at, paid plus unpaid?
Oh, let's see. We're over 5,000 and free subscribers. So, take it all together, it might be 6,000 people.
I see.
Or something read the newsletter every week.
You were writing weekly after the start up until the recent hiatus. Some longer pieces, some shorter pieces. I could tell you were sort of experimenting with exactly what was going to be the best model for it, probably with some feedback from readers. As you look ahead to July, have you adjusted the model at all in terms of what you plan to put out in sort of the second season?
The biggest adjustment I had to make was my initial model, which assumption was that if I got enough people to pledge, that I would publish as often as 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And that really is not workable or even desirable, I think, for most readers. I mean, there are Amazon newsletters available. You can get like Inside Amazon or whatever, where if you really want to get, the Amazon newsletter each day, you can get it. What seems to be most valuable to my readers is the kind of added perspective and context that I can give on a handful of stories each week, which means not covering everything necessarily, picking my spots in terms of the kinds of news I cover, and that's been a big learning process. That rather than it being a summary of everything Amazon does each week, which initially I thought would be kind of closer to what the model would be, is that it really is a much more a selection or an anthology of Amazon stories to each week.
I think I saw something, you gave a talk once, and you're talking about approaching a subject 2 ways. One, tiny bits, very close observation of a detail. I think you were talking about entering text on Netflix screens versus a whole huge epic overview of a subject. Do you have that same kind of sense that going forward you're going to be covering Amazon in one of those 2 modes?
Yeah, I think kind of telescoping between them, I think seems to be the thing that's the most valuable, is that being able to do extremely detailed reading, sort of close readings of individual things, and then taking the sort of 10,000 foot perspective in other things. So, but being able to collapse between the 2 of them seems to be the thing that's the most valuable.
Well, let's turn to the topic of Amazon itself. How important do you see Alexa as being to Amazon's future as it envisions it?
Alexa is really interesting because it's, apart from the Kindle and to a lesser extent the Kindle Fire, Alexa is the first tech product that Amazon's created that's really caught on and become extremely popular. It has almost defined the category, is that there are other voice assistants available and other voice assistants that are very successful, but Alexa and Alexa-powered devices are basically defining the category. You can imagine an Amazon without Alexa that is still very successful, but Alexa is a huge key to Amazon's future. It's creating a ubiquitous data layer, a ubiquitous computing environment is something that is a really powerful way for Amazon to bring its services and everything it offers to consumers everywhere they go. In that respect, I think it's hugely important.
You and others that are sort of talking about the rise of voice as the interface, that we're entering an era where we're probably going to be talking to our computing resources conversationally as opposed to graphically or with a mouse or whatever. If that happens, does that create like a whole new ecosystem for Amazon to dominate somehow, that it actually starts taking over how we communicate with our computers in a broader way than even just the smart home and the things that we can kind of see about that transition now?
Sure. I mean, you can imagine it taken to its limit, where it becomes the interface layer for how you interact with most of your machines, where it becomes an interface layer for your PC, an interface layer for your phone, an interface layer for your car. Now, is it necessarily going to have, full success at all of those, or that's kind of an open question. It has the possibility of that, which is what makes it important.
And it's a huge market, so even if they only got 20% of it, it would be
even if you only get cars. Yeah. I mean, it's like if Amazon becomes the interface layer that allows you to really bring computing to the car.
Yeah.
Like that's an enormous market, an enormous business opportunity, and that's leaving off everywhere else. It's leaving off earbuds, that's leaving off all the other different possibilities.
Yeah.
Tim and I each had some Alexa devices that were jumping into the conversation unbidden, and we didn't have them all turned off, so I suggested we just start calling her A.
A has been arriving as kind of a personality, and there's jokes and there's different interfaces. And when you, drawing on your comparative literature training and being steeped in literature and character development, if you were to describe A as a character from kind of a literary point of view, how would you describe her?
Well, she's not much of one yet. As far as, but, something, ideally what you would want is something that would be close to the narrator. There's something that would be something close to the omniscient narrator who could give you the details about everything that's going on in the lives of the other characters in the story.
Right.
So.
And you'd want it to be a trustworthy narrator.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. At South by Southwest a couple of years ago, Capital One was rolling out its skill for A, and you're going to be able to, talk to your Echo and get your bank account and all these other things. And there was somebody on their team who was like an English major at Middlebury or something, and her whole job was to sort of help them create the persona. And it was flawed because their persona had to speak with A's voice. They didn't actually get to create all the elements that would go into it. But I thought, gee, this is quite a fascinating development where people from liberal arts backgrounds steeped in literature turn out to be kind of the key success players on a bank interfacing with its customers.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the teams change and move so often, particularly within Amazon, that, someone will be very successful with Alexa and then they'll take them over and move them to a completely different part of the company. The criteria for success in different sectors change so much. It feels like A could have a very different personality within 6 months.
Yeah,
just
right.
Because Amazon decides that it wants the service to do something completely different.
Yeah, that's right. It's a total moving target.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos has come into the your Chronicles newsletter pretty regularly. I think you sometimes talk about a Jeff Bezos watch, and at one point you say that he sickens and fascinates you. Two pretty strong words. I was hoping you could explain a little bit more what sickens you about him and what fascinates you.
There's something about him that's just so over the top in terms of, sicken is the stronger word, and sicken is the word that, that is the one that has a harder time explaining. The fascinating part is a little easier.
Yeah.
I think it's more that I'm sort of sickened by my own fascination. Maybe let's put it that way. Is that I'm interested in him personally in a way that I find a little bit repulsive. In the sense that,
like, addictive.
a little bit addictive, a little bit intrusive, a little too much is where my fascination takes me with Bezos. And to the point where, you have to sort of reel it back a little bit. It's tempting to psychoanalyze him or to project his own personality onto the company. And I try to avoid doing that as much as possible because I think it can go a little too far and it can lead you astray. I don't think even somebody with as much control over a company as Bezos has over Amazon, it's not a pure reflection of him and his personality and his decisions and his story. It's many, many people at work and many situations coming together that create different possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah, it's kind of a construct. It's a shorthand when you start saying Amazon equals this one person, when obviously there's hundreds of thousands of people that work there now. There was another intriguing part. You wrote that if you get to 1,000 paid subscribers, you'll take the newsletter full Marxist or post-Marxist. That's a term I haven't heard from since my time at Harvard in the 60s. What exactly would a Marxist newsletter covering Amazon look like?
Well, so one of the things that I think you find when you write about Amazon a lot is that you and when you're taking on different criticisms of Amazon, and that's part of what I've tried to do with the newsletter is to make it not just a kind of roundup of Amazon news, but a critical roundup of Amazon news and a roundup of Amazon criticism, is that a lot of the criticism of Amazon winds up being criticism of capitalism, like as such. And so that sometimes takes you in a very Marxist direction. I mean, there's obviously a market for a newsletter that was nothing but 100% critical of Amazon all the time. And by critical, I mean negative about Amazon all the time. I try to be critical, but not relentlessly negative. And so the idea of a Marxist newsletter about Amazon would probably necessarily have to be 100% negative all the time, because it is the kind of an apotheosis of capitalism. So it's a little bit of a joke.
Yeah.
But it's also a kind of a reflection of the fact that Amazon is so close in some ways to the capitalist ideal that the criticism of it necessarily kind of becomes a kind of criticism of capitalism. I think that's something that actually reveals something to us about what it is that we really have a problem with when we have a problem with Amazon. Is not necessarily Amazon, but again, Amazon standing in for a whole degree of market forces and changes to our economy and changes to the way we live our lives.
You talk about the paper that the woman from Yale wrote about the Amazon paradox and quite a creative take on, is there a way to reimagine antitrust law as it's currently practiced? And up against that is always this popularity of Amazon and loyalty that its customers feel. And I think you specifically said at one point that if Amazon's able to maintain that going forward, it really becomes an obstacle for anyone either from the left or the right who has the opportunity to try to pursue some kind of a meaningful antitrust action against the company. Is that kind of how you see it?
I do think that is that Amazon's popularity is its biggest shield, its biggest and best defense, is the fact that Amazon is popular and Amazon is good at what it does. It does what it says it'll do.
Yeah. Why is it so popular?
I think because it does what it says it will do. Yeah. It delivers products at a low price point, quickly, and the new wrinkle I think this year has started to be products that you can trust. So that there is a level of trust in Amazon that Amazon is also working, I think, to try to maintain that high level of trust, where some of the anti-counterfeiting measures and other things have become seemingly more and more important to it.
There's one story that I heard on that Primed podcast that I first heard about in a comment to one of your posts. That's from a Seattle radio station.
KUOW, I think.
It was a really well done podcast for anybody that's interested in Amazon. But there's a story of this woman that bought $300 worth of Christmas presents and they got stolen. And then some very interesting treatment of it. You may have heard this episode talking about Amazon's purchase of Ring and Nextdoor and the paranoia people have in their neighborhoods. And then at the end of that episode, they went back and said, well, you might be interested to find out what happened. Some of the presents that she bought were from Macy's, and they'd been stolen, as well as the presents from Amazon. Macy's said, sorry, you paid for it, we delivered it. That's the end of the story. And Amazon gave her a full refund of all of the stuff that she'd bought from Amazon that had been stolen. I think the trustworthiness of the stuff is a lot of it, but I hear enough stories like that from people that listen to my show. It doesn't take much of a surprising level of empathy, or I don't know what you would even call it, for people on a case-by-case basis to start saying, I kind of love this company.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think, also the people who use their products, people who use the Kindle, people who use Alexa, it's not just the retail service, is that there is a kind of habitual trust and reliability that fosters a relationship.
I'm not sure about that.
Fosters a relationship of intimacy and a relationship of trust that is ultimately helps the company on the whole.
Yeah, it's really a relationship that's fed so many times during a week or even a day that it's a familiarity really that goes into it. I'd like to finish basically how you are reading, and you've had some interesting things to say about how reading on a Kindle is affected by how we read everywhere else, including street signs on the street, the sense that words are all around us and that our relationship with what we read changes over time. And if you were to look at yourself as an individual reader, how are you reading novels? When during the day are you reading? What would be sort of a portrait in 2019 of your own experience of reading?
Yeah. Well, I read on a combination. I read on a Kindle, and most of the long form reading I do tends to be done on a Kindle. I read on my laptop quite a bit, and not just the web, but we'll read comic books and PDFs and white papers and things like that, and usually spend most of the day reading one form or another all day, which I think is something else that is not necessarily completely well understood, is that we live in a world that's surrounded by text, but we spend most of the day reading. A lot of us do. Probably doing more reading than we've ever done before. And that is something that's really transformative to how we read. So that's something I believe in general, is that reading in one form affects how we read in any other form. So how we read memos and how we read the web and how we read on our phone changes how we read on how we read a novel, how we read a dictionary, how we read everything else.
Well, that's fascinating. I hope your operation goes well on May 22nd and that you are able to get back with resuming the Chronicles.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thank you again for being so kind about the name. For people who don't know, Len and I had a back and forth where I had not known about the Kindle Chronicles, and but Len was kind enough to let me continue to use the name.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought I would be remiss. I don't have a legal department here, but I would be remiss if I hadn't at least reached out. But I see us as fellow travelers on the same road to try to understand this pretty incredible entity, and I hope we're both at it a long time.
I hope so too. If I'm at it as long as you, I'll be doing very well.
That's it for this week. I am not sure who my guest will be next week. On Sunday, I'll leave Peters in Austin to fly to Boston to take care of some things back there, and then I'll turn around and come back to Denver on Tuesday. So I can imagine I'm going to be wandering airports saying, does anyone really know what time it is? Good trips. I love Southwest. These flights all happen on Southwest, and it's easy to change the flights. I don't have to pay for the bags, and I'm going to be able to take my travel guitar with me to Peter's house. So anytime I'm flying around the country on Southwest, I'm generally pretty happy. Knock on wood. I hope these flights go well. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles in Denver, Colorado. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.